If you are tuned in, it means that the check cleared. It's politicking, and it's coming next. Oh, boy, I tell you. Welcome to a show where politics is a joke. It's Politicking with Tony King, and we have a great show tonight. I'm telling you guys, we have the livest audience that's so hyped. Oh, I tell you, and as always, we will be discussing a lot of great issues on our panel, so you definitely want to stick around because there's so much you can learn, and of course, you know, we're going to laugh and have fun and do what we do. But before I continue, it's been a long time since we last hung out. I mean, has anything interesting happened? I mean, anything? Like, since the last time we had a show, has anything happened that, anything? Nothing? Okay, well, if you say so. Without further ado, it's time for the Serious Unserious News Report. Oh, I tell you, this guy is hilarious. Anyway, since our last show, there has been a beef that has taken over social media. I mean, the culture is split right down the middle. You got two camps going head to head, no holds barred. Attacks made, punches thrown. No, I'm not talking about Drake and Kendrick. I'm talking about Sharon and Ted.
That broom was sweet.
Though we are gearing up to head to the polls to see who's gonna lead us into the purge or prosperity, here in Baton Rouge, we've been prepping for our own major election. We have incumbent Sharon Weston Broome and former Southwest Regional Director of the Small Business Administration. They've jumped in this race, and they're early front runners in early polling and also fundraising. But just like going to a party at Diddy's house, things have quickly turned into a three-way, just without the baby oil. With political newcomer Coach Sid entering the race. You know, last week I had the honor of moderating the city's first mayoral debate, and let's just say, it was a steel cage match. I mean, Ted throws a punch here, Sharon jabs back, Ted elbows off the top ropes. Meanwhile, nobody said anything to Coach Sid. Coach Sid was off in the corner looking like that shoulder shrug meme. I even think I saw one time during the debate, he was playing Candy Crush on his phone. But if you think our local elections are crazy, it ain't got nothing on our national elections. I mean, is it me, or does what Trump say get wilder and wilder as the election nears?
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
I mean, the man said cats and dogs. They were eating cats and dogs.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
Recently, Donald Trump was at a rally, and when asked what he planned to do to protect jobs, his response.
So pretty much as we've been saying, and what I want to do is I want to be able to, look, your business, years ago in this area, I was honored as the Man of the Year. It was maybe 20 years ago. Oh, and the fake news heard about it. They said, it never happened, it never happened. And I didn't know who it was. It was a group that honored me as Man of the Year. The fakers back there, see the fake news? But they said, oh, and they looked and it, you know, they said it never happened. But
the man said he was Man of the Year. What does that have to do with jobs, Trump? That's like your woman asking, why didn't you come home last night? And your reply is, well, in high school, I was homecoming king. What does that have to do with anything? But Vice President Harris is not without her own quirks. I'm sorry, I gotta do it. I gotta do it. And though we don't know yet if she'll be the most powerful leader in the world, we already know she has the most powerful laugh. Kamala laughs loud. Y'all know I'm telling the truth. Continuing in national news, a homeless man in California was arrested for breaking into a bank just to microwave some Hot Pockets. Oh. When asked if it was worth it, his response was, hell yeah, it was worth it. So you mean to tell me you were homeless, broke into a bank, and didn't think to take the money, which could have gotten you somewhere to stay? Man, take that man to jail, man. I can see why you're homeless. You don't know how to apply yourself. And before you ask, yes, he was. In Florida, a man was arrested for trying to get an alligator drunk. And before you ask, he was too. And finally, Oregon State Police had to remind residents not to call 911 when they run out of toilet paper. Listen, when those Raoul burgers run through you, you calling on everybody, including the Lord. And that's gonna do it for tonight's Seriously Unserious News Report. Stay tuned. We have a very informative panel coming up for you. And of course, I always give you information you need to know, and you don't want to miss that top 5. Stay tuned. It's PoliTicKING.
Mad Game ENT.
Mad Game ENT.
Mad Game TV.
Mad Game Entertainment.
Mad Game Entertainment.
Mad Game Entertainment.
Mad Game Entertainment.
Mad Game Entertainment. Stay tuned, homie.
It's Friday night, and you're now clocked in on the Late Shift with Will Merrow.
And this Mad Game presents Friday Night Flows. Let's kick it off like this, baby.
Now, laugh later. And lock it in. We'll be right back with more cocktails, conversations, and me.
JK Lee Sports. Watching this on YouTube? Make sure you click that like and subscribe button on the MGE network. Holla.
Phoenix Air Spa provides its customers with a soothing environment and comparable professional services. And extraordinary results. Relax, recharge, and re-emerge anew at Phoenix Air Spa, always aesthetically you.
Opportunity awaits your child. Invest in their future with Louisiana Leadership Institute. For 3 decades, the Louisiana Leadership Institute has been an educational bridge for youth excelling to the next level.
The future is bright. Allow us as the Louisiana Leadership Institute to help light your child's path to success.
What's up? This is your girl Megan Good, and I want to give a shout out to Mad Game ENT.
Welcome back to a show that is wondering where in the hell did Diddy buy 1,000 bottles of baby oil?
Costco!
It's Politicking with Tony King. And, you know, as we prepare for this presidential election, and before you unfriend your aunt on Facebook for posting about migrants eating cats and dogs, just remember, you and your aunt, y'all are not so different. I mean, most liberals and conservatives are more alike than you could ever imagine. Like, sure, liberals work at Starbucks. Conservatives, Cracker Barrel. Yeah, so what liberals rock blue hair? Conservatives, they got mullets. It's the same thing. I mean, outside of that, it's practically the same. Take a touchy issue like abortion. See? Touchy subject. Y'all didn't even, it's just kind of touchy. But when you take abortion, like, you're for it. But your crazy aunt, she's against it. And even though you two have different opinions, let her daughter get pregnant by this guy. She will be pro-choice quicker than you can say my body, my choice. It's all relative. I mean, take guns, for instance, right? You're against them. Your aunt, she got a 22 in her bra right now as we speak. But let somebody break in your house right now. You'll be 2A all day real quick. I mean, we all have more in common than you think. Think about it. Conservatives say, well, if you outlaw guns, people will still get them illegally. Sound familiar? That's what they say about abortion. See, exactly the same. So before you cuss your aunt out for calling her Kamala,
It's Kamala.
just remember, y'all are the exact same. And one day, you're gonna be your aunt. Stay tuned. It's Politicking.
Advertising and operating a business go hand in hand. Mad Game Entertainment has a long, detailed history of working within clients' budgets and delivering big results. Mad Game helped launch the popular Go Vote app. We've been involved with several successful political campaigns. We assist the everyday marketing needs for small businesses and many other organizations. We custom fit marketing plans for the largest budget and the most modest. We look forward to enhancing your presence in your industry.
Welcome back to a show where everything that could have went wrong before the show went wrong.
And we here.
But the show must go on. It's Politicking with Tony King. And joining us for our panel, it's my pleasure. Had a wonderful time with him last season. So grateful to have him back because I always enjoy his conversation. Please welcome, he is a professor of political science at the Southern University. Give it up for Dr. Eugene Lee Johnson.
We got a doctor on the set.
Now, hold on, let me see. Were you doctor last time when we?
I was.
Okay, well, still. Grateful to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Okay, so you hear us talking about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot going on. This is like one of those years where it's just so much. We have an election nationally where we say the stakes have never been higher. And then we have, a local election where they say the stakes have never been higher. Now, one thing I want to ask is, we always say the stakes have never been higher. But each time they get higher. Do you feel like the stakes are as high as what we're saying they are now?
The stakes are always the same.
Yeah.
The way we react to them is different. And so what we've seen over the last few years, or I'll say over the last 13 or so years, with the basically creation of Donald Trump, the politician, is the media has changed the way that they've actually reported on these things. And as a member of the media, you know that, right? And so what we've seen is as Donald Trump's rhetoric sparks, as the people listen to it, we then react a certain way. And so the stakes are not any higher, but people believe they are because they see what goes on when people say stuff.
So, okay, so that's interesting you talk about how the media portrays Donald Trump. It's almost like you talk about over the last 13 years of his media career, and I've been pretty involved in politics for a long time. And I've never seen, it wasn't until Donald Trump came, in my opinion, that we really abandoned the news model and went full entertainment model.
Yeah.
And so it almost feels like we're still doing that now, even though it's always been a thing of, especially in local news, if it bleeds, it leads, the sensationalism to get the eyeballs on. But it's almost like now, at least then, there was a desire to at least inform a little. It's like now, we've kind of abandoned all of that. Now it's just all about full throttle attention.
Yeah.
Do you think that's helped or hurt us?
It's definitely hurt us. And I think what we have to realize is media has been on a slow burn for the last 19, 20 years or so. So if you think about when the O.J. Simpson case happened, O.J. Simpson case interrupted the 1995 NBA Finals.
I remember because the Rockets were playing and I'm from Houston.
Okay.
Yeah. Y'all were mad. Like, hey, man, we don't want to see O.J. Put that back on.
So y'all got one of the ones when Jordan was retired.
Yes.
Okay, I got it.
Whoa. Another show, another day.
Another show, another day. But that also brought into like this 24-hour court TV model where now we're seeing every single part of politics and law. Another good example is we're seeing all of the conversation around the YSL Young Thug trial right now. Because, of course, we know that Donald Trump and Young Thug got their RICO charges from the same exact person.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so what we're seeing now, we're seeing this in every industry, not just politics, but social media and the way that the conversation is shaped online is triggering the way that we present it on TV. Another good example is over the last week or so, we saw that Adrian Wojnarowski stepped down from ESPN, right?
Yes.
And we saw that Zach Lowe, who is one of the preeminent basketball writers, was let go from ESPN.
Right.
And what it shows is a lot of people say, well, hey, how are you going to let go Zach Lowe but keep Kendrick Perkins?
Yeah.
And because they believe that Kendrick Perkins doesn't present basketball in the way that it should be, but it's more entertainment based.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing in every single form of media that entertainment and clicks is actually going over informing the populace. But that also goes, and you can speak a little bit more to this, what does the population actually want?
So it's funny that you say that. What does the population actually want? If this were 40 years ago, 30 years ago, Donald Trump wouldn't have a chance. Because at a certain point, because we still were under the false pretense of a certain level of class and character. There was we were still acting.
I just think Donald Trump would have been covered differently 30 years ago, which would take down some of the animus that people have for him.
Okay, explain that.
So we've had entertainers run for president before.
Ronald Reagan.
Right?
George Bush.
Yeah.
The Junior.
Yeah. We've had people who've had scandals run for president before.
Ronald Reagan.
Right.
George Bush. Both of them.
And Donald Trump kind of formulates all of those things, but he never has to actually explicitly state any policy points because his fan base, basically his MAGA Republicans, they're gonna exalt everything that he does, even if he doesn't say it. And so, but also with the advent of social media, that's a totally different avenue that didn't exist 30 years ago. So now Donald Trump can drop a tweet at 2 a.m. in the morning, and by the time people wake up for the 6 a.m. news, it is the #1 topic. And so now, because of social media, because of 24-hour news, Donald Trump, we would have got some quiet time away from him. You know, after 10 o'clock news, we would have heard a peep, went to sleep, and then maybe the next time that day, we'll be like, okay, here's the next part of the news cycle. But because everything is 24 hours now, and also our sleeping is different, we basically just are always entrapped with what's going on. And so I think the coverage would be different.
So So you bring up a good point where you talk about people not really being interested in policy. And that's one thing that I find interesting now, especially after the first debate with Kamala and Donald Trump, or Vice President Harris and former President Trump, is that following, you know how they have the panels and they're asking people, what did you think? And the interesting point that I saw was you had people that were saying, well, I just don't know much about her, and I need to find out a little bit more about her policies. And I'm like, why are you lying? Yeah. When it comes to that type of election, it's not about policy. The average person is not smart enough to fully, or I'm not going to say they're not smart enough, they don't have the time enough to really delve into the information to really understand policy. It's really homecoming king.
Well, that's something that I said last year on this show, right? There's no such thing as an educated voter.
Yeah.
The information that is going into the population changes every second.
Yeah.
So you and I, we're in here on this show, PoliTicKIng with Tony King.
There we go.
But what's going on right now while we're talking to each other, we don't know.
Yeah.
And so literally when we step out of this room, the information that we had coming in is going to be different.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as an educated voter. So we're all ignorant at some level.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're right. It is like a homecoming king. It's a popularity contest. And we saw that especially when Joe Biden stepped aside and then said he was going to throw his power behind Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
We went through a primary process.
Yeah.
Joe Biden was the Democratic nominee for president. And so when he stepped aside, it basically became, who are we going to put into this place? Number one, to think that we can win, but number two, to excite the voting populace.
Yeah.
And when he said that, because the rumor is that everyone wasn't behind Kamala Harris.
I mean,
they wanted to have a process of electing someone else.
Naturally, I mean, it's kind of hard for everybody to get behind one thing. If me and you said, let's order a pizza, man, we'd probably argue over it for about a good 5 minutes.
But what we saw, though, is you had specific groups jump behind Kamala Harris so fast that everybody else didn't have an opportunity to fight it. On Sunday night, 5 hours after Joe Biden said, I'm putting all my power behind Kamala Harris, we had Win with Black Women.
Yeah.
Black women get on a call 6 hours later, raise $2 million. Just that quick. And you know what they say? Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Then the next day you get black men. Then you start getting Latino women. And then it's just so.
It turned into everything. Everybody was trying
There was a white man for Kamala Harris, and they were on there. They had like Joe Burrow. He's on there with his earring, looking like he just came from Tigerland. But he's like, hey, y'all, vote for Kamala. And it was very interesting.
You know, they had auto workers for Kamala. I was like, they going down the list now at this point. I mean, it was bad.
But that's how you build coalitions, right? You get these different groups to build within themselves, and then you try to basically create partnerships between them. So when you have Win with Black Women, then you have Win with Black Men, then you have Win with Latino women. Now we have these three different coalitions that we need to get into one umbrella of the Democratic Party.
So it's interesting that you talk about being an informed voter. I've tried to be an informed voter this cycle. You know, one thing that we've heard about is the boogeyman, Project 2025. So I actually downloaded all 925 pages of it. And I've gotten past the foreword, which is a good 100 pages in itself. And some of the things that I've had a chance to view, I'm wondering, is that something that we really need to be worried about, Project 2025? I think that that's much ado about nothing, and I think it's something to stir us up. What do you think about that?
So this is what I'll say. Project 2025 has been something that has been in the works for decades, even a century, right? So it's created by the Heritage Foundation, which is kind of like ALEC, where they create policies and then they basically try to give them off to politicians to actually enact.
Because unbeknownst to most people, you don't have to wait for a politician to write a law. You
can write it and present it. And so the reason why it is something that we should pay attention to is there's something that a lot of people kind of missed earlier this year. Earlier this year, we had the Supreme Court, or the U.S. versus Donald Trump. And in that case, the Supreme Court ruled that there would be something called executive immunity, which means if Donald Trump becomes president, he can perform specific executive actions without actually being arrested for them, which gives him the opportunity to take some of those ideas that are in Project 2025. If he says, I want to do away with the Department of Education, if he becomes president because of that new Supreme Court law, he has the ability to say, the Department of Education is done. It's wiped off. And so that's the reason why we should actually be cognizant of it and partially, I don't want to say fearful fully, but just understanding what it can do. But at the same time, as Black people, we always pride ourselves on our ability to overcome anything. And when you actually read Project 2025, you'll see basically stuff that we've been going through for a long time. Whether they've been on the books or not.
And that's the thing that shocked me was I was really like, yeah, okay, that's already been tried. Or the thing that so you just said something that stood out to me. You talked about the immunity. I thought the immunity was more so for criminal offenses.
No, that could
You're
be
saying it's for political.
It could be for political. And so the way it presents itself is not only can he not be incarcerated for his actual felony
Shooting
convictions.
somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Right. Yeah. But it also creates this ability where you no longer have the opportunity to have checks and balances there.
Yeah.
And so if he says, I want to do this, he can do it. And so, but the thing is, it creates a conundrum because if that policy is in place, that means Democrats have the same power, so why don't they use it?
So, okay, but we've already talked about that a lot of times Democrats are, typically do not operate with the same level of force that the Republican
and they still operate with a certain level of decorum.
Yeah.
This is customary how we do things.
Bygone time.
And so we're going to continue to do these things. And often, what we've seen over the last, 8 years or so is that has gotten them run over in certain aspects. And now you're kind of seeing like, okay, maybe we need to think about things differently. You see Kamala Harris changing the way that we talk about Donald Trump and other Republicans. Like earlier this year, Kendrick Lamar had his song "Not Like Us," and there's that main lyric: "Baca got a weird case. Why is he around?"
Right.
And so "weird" became the word of the year. So they started saying, "Well, Donald Trump and those Republicans are weird."
Yeah. Even Tim Walz was
saying it, and it created this conundrum where Republicans are like, we hate that you're calling us weird. And it's like, how can something so small and simple as a word like weird impact them so much? But because it's connected to all of these dastardly things, it now becomes nasty.
So let me ask you this. Of the bullet points of Project 2025, like I said, 925 pages. I encourage you to download it and read some of it yourself. Of the 925 pages of it, what are some of the things that stand out to you that we need to be worried about? Because I got something that I'm worried about.
So number one, I think as Black people, we have to be worried about the removal of immigrants. We have to be worried about the collapse of the Department of Education. We have to be worried about mandatory minimum sentences becoming longer. And so these are things that are going to impact Black people at a everyday level, right? Black people are trying to figure out what jobs am I going to have access to, right? And so a lot of times they put us in competition with Latino people. But it also becomes a question of, if there are no other minorities here, then who's the person that I get to beat on even more?
And that in turn would be
Black people. But also when you think about schools that are in Black communities, and we think about, of course, on a local level, property taxes, the funding from the Department of Education at a state level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of our Black schools already aren't funded. So if you do away with the Department of Education, you basically have like the school from Lean On Me. Get the chains off the doors. Get the chains off the doors. It becomes this place where basically it's like a prison. And if you're thinking about how the school to prison pipeline actually operates, a lot of that is in the aesthetics. If you go to a lot of schools in Baton Rouge, you'll see the walls are tan or gray. They have 2 simple doors at the front, 2 simple doors at the back, 1 on the side. They have burglar bars on some of the windows.
They even have the drop down
the door to the partake. Some of them even have barbed wire on fences surrounding it. It's the same thing that prisons have.
Especially parish prison. Don't ask how I know. It's a long week.
But it's also, it reminds me of my experience. I went to a large school here in Baton Rouge, and I remember having to, my class was one of the first ones where they said, y'all have to have clear and mesh backpacks. I remember riding transfer and the police officers coming on our transfer bus, checking people, throwing people in the ground at transfer when it was at Independence Park, beating people up. And I always thought about how it created this thing where we believe kind of that police brutality was normal. You would see people get beat up and a lot of us would just laugh like, oh my gosh, look what's going on outside. But then you start to realize like, wait, that is a child that is being beaten by an agent of the state. And so once we start to put those things together and we can bring this back to Project 2025, you're basically going to have the desecration of all of the institutions that create policies that allow us to move forward. I always tell my students, you have to be in the know of what the policy actually says. Like I might tell you a joke, but I never tell you a lie. But the thing is, a lot of times people think you're presenting opinions. But let's go back to the Civil War amendments. The 13th Amendment, right? The 13th Amendment was what?
It's outlawing of slavery.
It's outlawing of slavery unless there's criminal servitude, right? What's the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment is you're getting the right to citizenship.
Yeah.
Except when you read
all natural born citizens.
For all natural born citizens. But when you read Section 2 of the amendment, it also says that basically that could be taken away if you participate in rebellion or crime. What's the next amendment? Number 15. Number 15 is the right to vote. But we know black people didn't get the right to vote until the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965.
Which we're celebrating right now. We just celebrated here. What was that, the 59th anniversary?
Exactly.
Yeah.
60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday.
Yeah.
Voting Rights Act of 1965 coming up next year. Where there are going to be a lot of people going actually from Baton Rouge. But when you think about that, the policy was presented to us to say this is going to be allowed.
Yeah.
But in the same policy, you see that they have these little shortcuts
that says we can take it away.
We can take it away.
Yeah.
And so you have to be knowledgeable of those things. And I think that's why it's important for us to have programs like this where we can create accessible language for people.
Yeah.
Create language that the people can understand, so when they go to the voting booths or when they're looking at debates and things like that, they understand what these politicians are saying, because they will present it in a way that you don't understand on purpose.
Now, here's the thing. So I can clearly see that the removal of the Department of Education is very near to you, especially being an educator, on the college level. That's something that stands out to you. For me, what stood out to me reading Project 2025 was they want to outlaw porn. And so that's something that's really near and dear to my heart, that that I want to work hard to protect.
You see?
Now, I'm not talking about exploitation of minors, things that we conflate to porn. I'm not talking about forced exploitation. I'm not talking about pimping and pandering. I'm talking about just some good old-fashioned OnlyFans. I don't want that taken away. And I don't want to turn into a criminal just because I want to see a BBW taking a shower. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and so that actually is an important issue.
So get out the vote.
But we joke, but sexual freedom is a freedom that people should have the ability to have, right? And so when we start to try to chastise what is going on in people's homes, that goes into surveilling a population, and it goes into an easier way for us to make sure that we outlaw everything. It might be porn today, and then tomorrow it might be the NFL.
Well, my thing is this, do you know how hard it is to go old school and just look at like a magazine? I'm not trying to go backwards, brother. I'm not trying to go backwards. That's all I'm saying. Hey, we got more on this discussion coming up, and we're going to definitely talk about local elections here because that's pretty hot as well. Stay tuned. It's Politicking with Tony King. Don't miss it.
Anyone seeking an elected position must start here, with the people. Because once you're elected, these are the faces that matter. To be an effective judge, you have to know the people, and they need to know you. I'm Niles Hamer, and together we can make a difference.
You like wine, right? Okay, well, come and follow me, like and share.
Welcome back to a show where we root for every football team in Louisiana. Except for Grambling. So, it's Politicking. And we're here talking with Dr. Eugene Lee Johnson, professor of political science at Southern University. We just finished talking about the national election and all of the major implications. We definitely want to encourage you to do some of your own research and your homework, just so you can become more informed and more aware, regardless of whatever decision you have. Make sure you exercise that decision. Now, we talked about national elections, and as heated as they are, but we're in the middle of a pretty hot local election. And this is probably one of the most, I would say, competitive and contentious elections that I've been a part of here since I've moved here, and I've been living here for some time. We have the mayoral election. Of course, we have incumbent seeking a third term, Mayor Sharon Weston Broome. Never lost an election, which she holds that distinction in her political career. We have Edward Ted James, former regional director of the Southwest Small Business Administration, Southwest Region. And we have Coach Sid, Emil Sid Edwards, current football coach at Estruma High School.
Yeah.
And
we also have Nathaniel Hearns.
We do. I'm just speaking because we have seven major. We have 7 candidates who have qualified. I'm just speaking of the 3 who are polling at the highest. We have Coach Sid at 23%, and that's not to discount any of them. We definitely want to encourage everyone to seek out and find out information about all of the candidates. The point that I wanted to make is that. Does this election seem a little more personal than any local election that you've been a part of in recent years?
Yes. And however, I think that's just because of the makeup of the race, right? So basically, the way party politics works is often a party will say, this is our candidate. Yeah. Everybody get behind this person. Yeah. And so what we have here right now is we have the interests of Edward Ted James, where it's basically, I don't want to follow that party politics. Yeah. I believe that I am a valuable candidate that can do great things for this city.
Right now.
Right now. Yeah. So that's my time. And so, because, there probably was behind the scenes talks to tell him,
I'm sure.
Wait 4 more years.
Yeah,
and once
sure.
she's done, it's your turn.
Yeah.
But he has an extensive political background here in Baton Rouge as well.
As well as nationally.
As well as nationally. Of course, Mayor Broome, I believe, won her first election in 1986 for Metro Council. So what you have here is a 38-year political career, which is right now culminating in a 3rd term for Mayor-President of East Baton Rouge Parish. But Ted was District 101 representative for 10 years before he went to work for the SBA. He also was supposed to be in line to be the Democratic Party chair here in Louisiana. And so he has a lot of respect from a lot of people. But we also now have the influx of generational divide. Older Baton Rouge versus younger Baton Rouge.
That's the interesting dynamic that I have seen, and I mentioned it in the opening segment, is that you have essentially this split down the middle of, for lack of a better term, Black Baton Rouge. It's old Black Baton Rouge, and not old as in trying to be ageist, but there's this older regime versus this younger regime.
It's the establishment Democrats for Baton Rouge, basically. The people that have been in office since the early 2000s and before, they've all stuck together, make sure their constituents vote for each other, and Ted is interfering with that.
So the thing that I found, and the interesting perspective that both of us have, is that we've both had the opportunity to moderate platforms with these candidates. And I would say you more so because you had a bigger slate of candidates to be able to speak with. What do you think do you think it's positive that even though the healthy exchange of ideas should always be something welcomed in our political stratosphere, do you think that it is where we are going with this election? Do you think that it's in the best interest of Baton Rouge? I know that was a tough question. I put you on the spot with that. I'm sorry.
I'll say it's a middle part, yes and no.
Okay.
If we want healthy politics from a local, state, or a national level, we need to have candidates that are going to present quality policy, even if that means someone that's already in office is being challenged.
Okay.
That is what we should want. It's the same way we should always ask politicians to give us something for our votes. As citizens, we have that right. On the other hand, though, I do think there is a lack of people understanding that you have Coach Sid Edwards, Coach Emil Sid Edwards, as basically the dark horse. Because he's a Republican, there's already a small amount where they're like, he's not going to win Baton Rouge because Baton Rouge is black and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if we look at the recent polls, and I have a lot of issues with polls, but if we look at the recent polls and we see that Mayor Broome is 29% and Coach Sid Edwards and Ted James are both at 23%, it tells you that, okay, this race can be split down the middle. If Mayor Broome had that other 23% of Democrats from Ted James, would she be over that 50? And would we expect her to just win outright in November instead of potentially, which is what it's looking like, going to a runoff in December?
So I look at it differently. because I'm looking at a potential third term. By all accounts, again, a politician who has never lost an election. You just said 38 years in politics here in Baton Rouge alone. Who has defeated, major candidates, just to even get to the Metro Council and later on to the State House and things like that. But what I see is someone who should be polling a lot higher in that position. 29% is very low. I could see 40. But does it say more about the 23% who didn't see that as a viable option versus Ted being in the election?
I think a good comparison to point that we can make is to national politics right now. Earlier, we talked about Joe Biden stepping down and Kamala Harris, then becoming the nominee for the Democratic Party. Yeah. Well, we saw that Joe Biden's polling numbers had dropped drastically before he dropped out of the race. Right. But then the Democratic Party, as soon as Kamala Harris got that place, the polling numbers changed over. Right. The Democrats party was excited again. They were like, hey, we feel like we could win this race. Meanwhile, for the last year or so, people were kind of waiting in limber like, oh my gosh, there's a very big chance that we're going to lose. Yeah. Right? And so here in Baton Rouge, you have something similar where you have this young candidate, and this has nothing to do with Mayor Broome. It's just you have a young, established candidate who is able to galvanize a population. Ted James is a charismatic man. He has a very good record. He's homegrown, McKinley graduate, Southern University BR, Southern University Law Center. He has everything that we as a people in Baton Rouge would look for in a leader. Yeah. And so you have a certain group of people, and a lot of times this is separated on generational lines, it's separated on gender lines, it's separated on socioeconomic status, or even because of the input of St. George, is separated on regional lines and racial lines. And so Ted is able to pull these people from these different places because they believe in him as a candidate. Yeah. I don't think that has anything to do with Mayor Broome. Now, with her trying to win a third term, being that she's been in office for so long, I believe you're trying to say like, hey, because of her pristine time in office and record, it should be easy. Yeah. Right?
Or at least more than 29%.
It should be more than 29%. But the difference between the national level and the local level, state level, is that on the national level, there's never going to be a candidate popular enough to be pushed out to actually, defeat Joe Biden in a primary. Yeah. It's not going to happen. But on the local level, there's less people. There's easier ways for coalitions to be built on the ground because all politics is local. Right. So when you think about these things, it's easier for her numbers to go down and someone else's numbers to go up just because of the terrain that we exist in. It's different from national politics. And so I don't think that has anything to do with her. And I believe her numbers after these debates and these forums could change as well. They could go up or down. Yeah. And the conversation we're having could basically cease to exist in a week. Right. But at this moment right now, from those polls from the end of last week, it's now creating a situation where it's like, okay, there's a 6% difference. How does that shake out as it pertains to a runoff? Yeah. And I think that's very important when you're thinking about Coach Sid, who's right there, and you're going to have some of the Ted James coalition that says, well, I want to vote for Ted. I want to vote for Coach Sid.
Well, the thing that makes Coach Sid such and I spoke about this in the monologue, is that, so I think it's a tale of two debates, right? And yours was more, it was classy. Like everybody was nice. It was still, you still felt a little.
We tried to make sure it was just about policy, no confrontation.
I tried to make sure it was like that too. But the thing is that I think that there's such a personal feeling between Mayor Broome, and this is no disrespect to Mayor Broome, between Mayor Broome and Ted, that it feels like it's kind of hard not to go there when you are talking about policy.
But think about it. It's like family fighting.
So exactly.
Exactly. It's like you're supposed to keep these things in family. Why are they going out here and putting the family business on Front Street?
But that was one thing that was said in the debate that I moderated was, Ted said, hey, I believe that we are still allies. And she said, no, I beg to differ, we're not. And so I'm like, whoa. But the thing is that there's a different level of tension that I've seen, but meanwhile, Coach Sid is not getting any of that attention, and people are saying, hey, this is, exactly what he's saying. He said, hey, this is why I did not participate in the political process for the last number of years. And then on top of that, he's had the opportunity to educate and coach kids for 20 plus years. And I've known some
40 plus,
white and black, who are like, I'm voting for Coach Sid simply because of that relationship that he's developed with all those who are now grown 30, 40.
So I actually made a comparison at the forum we had when in introductions. Coach Sid is very much so like vice presidential candidate Tim Walz.
Mm-hmm.
He's an educator. He's a football coach. Yeah. And one thing that we love in the South is our football.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And
except for Grambling football.
Except for Grambling
Except for
football.
Grambling.
And so when we have these conversations, though, he comes in, he's like, hey, I'm not a politician,
yes,
but I know how to build a staff. Mm-hmm. My offensive coordinator is smarter than me. Mm-hmm. My defensive coordinator is smarter than me.
Yes.
I could bring a team together.
Yeah.
And we take those tenets and we're like, oh, you know what? Politics is very much so like football. Yes. Coach Sid can pull a team together. And a lot of people are going to actually buy it.
Yeah.
Right? Even though he doesn't have
political
experience. And so you're asking someone with no political experience whatsoever to now enter into the highest office in this city.
But here's one thing that I think gives him another advantage. You mentioned Coach Sid is a Republican. Mm-hmm. And even though local politics is not as important as it is in national politics, we can't overlook the fact that the Metro Council is 7-5 right now.
Yeah, you can't overlook it.
And so it seems to be that there would be a lot of, or there would be least resistance or less resistance with some of the things that he may want to do. And so I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing with him actually ascending to that office without that experience, because he would have a group of allies that make up the majority on the Metro Council.
Well, you got to also understand that there is a new position for a city manager that is actually on our ballots this year.
Yes.
And so the mayor, regardless of who it is going to have to, I don't want to say share power, but they're going to have to exceed some of their power, probably about 30%, to this city manager. And so now, not only and someone in his position who's new, he would have a city manager who has experience, who has the education, et cetera, to help him in that role. But for someone like Mayor Broom or someone for like Ted James who has that experience, that city manager could possibly be a detriment to them.
And the city manager position is important that we note that it's not an elected position.
Exactly.
It is an appointed position by the Metro Council.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so that creates an entirely different dynamic in that situation. But at the same time, I think Coach Sid, because this race is going to go to a runoff regardless.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think Coach Sid presents himself in a way that is appealing to voters.
Yes.
And because of the infighting that is happening between the two major Democrats on the ticket, it's ultimately going to turn some people off who would normally vote for one of those candidates. And they'll just say, well, you know what? Coach Sid seems like a good man. I'm going to vote for him.
Well,
and I have to say, like, when you look at Coach Sid's record, he was at Redemptress for about 20 years.
Yes.
He came back to Estruma. He's been in the 70805 area code, which is predominantly black, for a very long time.
Yes.
And so this isn't a candidate who has no experience talking to black people, right? And so for a lot of black people, there's often a disconnect there between those candidates. But because he doesn't have that disconnect, there are going to be some black voters who are like, I am totally fine with Coach Sid being in that office.
So it's funny that you say that. I have a friend, her daughter used to film, when he was at Central, used to film for the football team. Her daughter is 25 now.
Yeah.
Her daughter said, hey, I'm voting for Coach Sid.
Yeah.
You know,
but think about how many of us have fond memories of a specific teacher.
Yeah.
It may not be every teacher, but there's a teacher that you could probably think of in your head right now. It's like either that teacher helped me get snacks, or they helped me with learning, or they protected me from bullying, whatever. But a lot of us have those fun memories, and Coach Sid has been in a place where I can be in the classroom, but also I could be on the sideline of 3 state championship winning teams to show you that, hey, I can win and I can put a team together.
And by all accounts, everybody who's interacted with him, they have nothing but great things to say.
Nothing but great things to say.
And I said that after the debate, the first person who came up to me was his wife. And, you know,
sweet lady, I met her.
Very nice. And the same thing I said to him was, hey, this is my first time meeting you, but by all accounts, everyone has great things to say about you, and I do as well. And so I really think that that's going to make a major dent in this entire election. And I do have a prediction. I have a prediction but I won't say it until after after the election. But go ahead.
So I think going back to the polls, like one thing I want to note is I want to make sure that the viewing audience and the listening audience understands that polls shouldn't be the end all be all of how we look at these candidates.
Yeah.
Polls are often taken, which they're better in an area like a city versus national, but polls are often undersampling every population.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it, they say, hey, we see that 30% of black men aren't going to vote for Kamala Harris or whatever the number is, or we see that 27% of black people in Baton Rouge are going to vote for Mayor Broome, whatever the numbers may be. You got to understand that this is versus a small sample size.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that we can look at outside of polls is we can look at donations. Who specifically are donating as it pertains to corporations and individuals.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we can look at also is what are their advertisements looking like? Where are they being presented?
Yeah.
And so you'll know where a candidate is doing strong when you see where their money is going, basically. And so I think it's important for us to follow those things outside of just following polls, because polls can be incorrect.
Yeah.
And depending on who's doing them, polls can just be flat out wrong.
Right, right.
But there are other ways to kind of gauge the effectiveness of a candidate. And at your debate that you moderated, I believe y'all picked it off of the candidates who had received a certain amount of donations and were polling at a certain level.
You had to meet a donation threshold well as to be polling as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically what y'all did was y'all was like, yeah, polls are important.
Yeah.
But
no,
also
who's getting the money?
Who's getting the money?
Yeah.
Because the money shows you who's viable.
Exactly.
The same thing works with national elections. And so it's just very important for people to understand that, so you can start to think about politics differently, especially when they start throwing out these talking points on the national election and this local election.
And to mix in both of those points and circle in, just as a note, the last fundraising report, Ted James was leading in fundraising, even though all of them had significant amounts of money for a mayoral election.
And that is becoming a source of contention, because people are saying, we think this money came from insert group of people, which they're saying don't have the best ideas for Baton Rouge.
You're talking about, let's go ahead and just say it,
St.
George. Yeah.
And so, I didn't look at to see who the actual donors were yet. I haven't had time because last week has just been busy.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people are presenting that as this is his number one source of donations. And if St. George is the number one source of donations for Ted James, that obviously means he doesn't have the best interest in heart for the people in these districts.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, I always got to tell people, this is Mayor-President.
Yeah.
So regardless of who's elected,
you still have to deal with them.
Yes,
absolutely. So that's interesting that you talk about that, and we can talk about that for a million years, and we will, because we got to get you back, because the conversation is always great. But you want to stick around. We have more coming up right here on PoliTicKIng. You don't want to miss it. And of course, the top 5, and we got the livest audience right here. PoliTicKIng with Tony King. Stay tuned.
What is it that you think is their chief criticism of your administration that makes them think that there's a time for a change?
Me and the person, we've never had a conversation about it. I do know 4 years ago they called me and they asked me to do something that I couldn't do. And it just seems like from there everything went left.
As you could probably tell, we are too young to vote. But that doesn't mean we aren't up on serious issues.
Like the ones that affect everyday people, which is why we need the right person on the bench.
And our dad is the best.
But his campaign needs help to win. Our dad is always working hard helping people. So come on, people, let's help him.
Go to this link or scan this QR code. Let's put the best on the bench.
Support our dad's campaign.
Oh, it feels so good to be back. Welcome back to a show that has had more laughs than Diddy's Got Baby Oil.
That's a lie.
And speaking of, those Diddy charges and the stories coming from it get wilder and wilder by the day. I think the one that was the wildest was the one that said the feds found 784 sex toys at his house. 784. My first thought was, who in the hell counted all 784? Could you imagine that? He just sitting there, 1, 2, 3. You messed up my count, I gotta start over. Hold on. 1. But here's the thing. That is never funny. And the allegations, they're nothing to laugh at. I mean, he's facing some serious time, if not life in prison. And at any level of sexual assault, it's no laughing matter. But we ain't laughing at the sexual assault. We ain't laughing at that. We laughing at all the memes that didn't come from the arrest. Which brings us to the top 5 funniest Diddy memes. Maybe just a little bit. Coming in at number 5, Game of Combs. The throne made of baby oil. Boy, I tell you that, boy, the internet is undefeated. Coming in at number 4, the Diddy dunk. What's so bad about this one? This ain't even a meme. Like, this really happened. NBA player jumped over Diddy and he was all smiles at the view. Nuts in his face.
No Diddy.
Coming in at number 3. This one is courtesy of the troll master himself, 50 Cent. The Diddy baby oil brand. Look at that one, boy. Boy, that 5th, boy. He don't stop, boy. Coming in at number 2. They say this is how Diddy used to show up at his parties, all oiled up. Not a piece of ash on him. And coming in at number 1, top 5 funniest Diddy memes, the Diddler strikes again. That's gonna do it for tonight's top 5. Special thanks to our panel guest, Dr. Eugene Lee Johnson. And remember, you are running out of time to register to vote. You gotta let your voice be heard. Regardless of who you are voting for, exercise your right. A voteless people is a hopeless people. So we want you to log on to the Secretary of State website. If you have not registered to vote, you still got just a little bit of time. Or you can download the Go Vote app, find out about your polling location and all of that. We want your voice to be heard. But that's gonna do it for us here at PoliTicKIng. We're back. And until next time, we out. Yeah.